Yeah, just click on accept. Huh? Oh yeah, it's already recording. Oh, forget about it. Just X out and try it again. That's what it asked me to do. Michelle, what's your password? Yeah. Right. That's even funny. You made it. No, I didn't like that. Forgetful. Yeah. Anything odd about it? Just the capital F. It's still not. Did it work? It's doing it. It is? Yeah. Yeah, I just added. Check your settings. Font microphone. Let's see.
Testing 1 2 testing.
Okay, you there?
Yeah.
Cool. Here, let's.
This is an omnidirectional mic.
Do it.
An omnidirectional mic.
Okay.
I'm gonna move it here.
That's fine.
You got it plugged in?
Yeah,
There you go.
I did.
Okay.
Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't plug that guy in.
So, this will direct it to you and not pick up my voice like that. Let's see. So, go up here. See if it recognizes that. There it is.
Let me check the sound real quick. Testing.
I can hear you. Do I need to be closer to the mic?
Yeah, just a little bit. You can pull it down. Okay.
Testing 1, 2. Testing.
Okay, a little too close. Right there.
Testing 1, 2.
Yeah, you're good.
Testing.
Cool. All right. Let's see. Let's do that. How's that?
You sound good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so, all right. You want to do the intro?
Yeah.
One, 2, 3, go.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Raceday Roundup. And I'm your host, Shannon Price, alongside Showtime. Shay McClure, say hi.
Hey, man. How's it going?
It's going well. And of course, we're headquartered at Raceday Center, 800 feet from the world's fastest half mile, Bristol Motor Speedway. And we'll be bringing you our insights and thoughts on NASCAR, breaking down the previous race and giving you our take on the sport. Now, remember, all questions, comments, and concerns can be directed to our email at racedayroundup@gmail.com. And this is actually our second episode titled Daytona Recap. And we are minutes removed from the Daytona 500, the 2019 Daytona 500, in which Denny Hamlin scores his second victory in the Great American Race, and one that was probably well needed on his part, maybe to get him off the hot seat. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also talk about some other storylines that occurred throughout the afternoon, along with throughout the week as well. So anyway, we're glad you're listening to us, and we'll start off by saying congratulations to Denny Hamlin and the FedEx team, Joe Gibbs, of course, the racing, and with Denny at the wheel there. Shay, Denny really needed this win after a 2018 season in which he was winless. Obviously, anybody who watches the sport knows that Christopher Bell is waiting in the wings, so to speak, in the Xfinity Series for a Cup ride, potentially at Joe Gibbs Racing. But talk to us a little bit, Shay, about your thoughts on Denny Hamlin scoring his second Daytona 500 win and first win since the 2017 season.
Yeah, I thought that Denny really needed this one. Like you said, you've got a up-and-coming Busch race car driver, and he is going to be odd man out if he's not careful. We have currently Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Busch currently in the stable of Joe Gibbs with Eric Jones, who's an up-and-comer, and you got to be looking at Denny as third man, which is really fourth man out. The way I look at it, you got an up-and-comer in Eric Jones. Denny Hamlin's now entering the stage of his career in which he's got to either be on the heading to the zenith, or you're going to want to take a shot on some other rookie coming up that might be the next big thing. Kyle Busch is established. Martin Truex Jr. has won a championship. So Denny just really needed to prove that he was still a top quality driver after what he would consider a disappointing 2018 season. I was really happy for him. It's a feel good story because of Gibbs Racing and what I'm on with Gibbs' son JD, who helped start the Gibbs organization, was co-founder with his father in starting the Gibbs Racing crew. I would just hope that Denny can continue this momentum. I've always personally been okay with Denny and enjoyed watching him race. So he probably needed it more than anybody. I did find it very interesting. What did you think about the end of the race? And, you know, the dealing and the wheeling and dealing needed to happen between him and Kyle Busch in order for him to secure that victory.
Yeah. That was interesting because obviously it did come down to teammates, Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin for the win, and who was going to restart and what lane, whether it be the high lane or the low lane or what have you. And yeah, I found that pretty interesting. Just to go back on the topic that we were talking about with Denny Hamlin, I agree with you. I do think it was very important for Denny to win, because when you look at drivers such as Matt Kenseth, Greg Biffle, and there have been others who've kind of been shuffled to the wayside in light of the new talent, the younger drivers who are coming up through the ranks there. And you know, Denny's no spring chicken. So I do think it was. I think it was big for Denny and that team to have won the Daytona 500. How long it takes him off the hot seat is anybody's guess. I don't know. I know I asked you that, Shay, right after the race there, and I guess time will only tell.
Well, it's only going to be as good as he can secure sponsorships. I think right now NASCAR is being driven by sponsorships. They're not that readily available. So Denny need to win this race. I mean, if this would have been Martinsville, it's not as big as it being the Daytona 500. Now, whether or not I agree that Daytona should be more important than Martinsville, that's from me looking in, not being an insider of racing, but Daytona is a highlight, a crown jewel of the racing community, probably a step below a championship. So for Denny to win that, that's more important than if he stepped up and won Bristol or something like that. This is like a iconic moment for him, especially at a very crucial time. So hopefully it helps him throughout the year. But if he doesn't build on this momentum, or say he goes out first in the round of 16, I don't know. He might go right back on the hot seat. We might see him next year being a defending champion, racing for somebody else, or being out of racing completely. You never know. I mean, Kenseth never could find a ride. Biffle lost his ride. I mean, at his age, he could just lose his ride. I mean, I don't know that he's in control of his destiny yet. What do you think?
Yeah, and Jamie McMurray's another one that occurred that just came to my mind while you were saying that is on his way out. Obviously, this was his last, supposedly his last Cup start as he's joining the Fox booth. So obviously, there's a youth movement, and the older guys seems to be shuffled out. Again, Kurt Busch, who took over Jamie McMurray's ride in the one car for for Ganassi. He's no spring chicken either, and interesting to know that that's a 1-year deal. Kurt Busch in the one car for Chip Ganassi. That's a 1-year deal. So he's going to have to produce quickly to keep that ride over there at Ganassi. So it's a high pressure business, and at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's a business, and yeah, we consider it a sport, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's a business as well. Getting back to your question about the outcome of Kyle versus Denny there at the end of the Daytona 500. Obviously, I think those were the two strongest cars left in the field. Joey Logano probably was up there too, but anyway. I know you said this at the end of the race. You kind of felt like Vince Welch, the reporter for Fox, was kind of I don't know, trying to put words into Kyle Busch's mouth in terms of if he had it to do over again, would he have restarted in a different lane, or would he have done things differently? And give Kyle, you got to give Kyle credit. I mean, he was the company man and gave the politically correct response, which was, hey, our main concern was that Joe Gibbs Toyota won the race. Then after that, we're gonna race it out. But you could see the dejection on Kyle's face. I mean, it was apparent that he was disappointed, obviously, and Kyle even made mention of it. Hey, I've got 0 Daytona 500 wins, and Denny has 2. Yeah, we knew that. I don't know where he was going with that, other than I don't know if he was trying to say that Denny should have let him win it. I don't know, but anyway, I just I thought he handled it pretty nice. I mean, we've all seen Kyle Busch blow up and run to the holler, or I thought he handled it pretty classy.
Well, I think Kyle was very good with the way he handled it, and I also think that it just kind of shows Kyle's competitive nature and what he just expects to go out there and win. However, I mean, he did the correct thing in that Denny was the race leader, and you would expect any Joe Gibbs cars, if they're 1-2, they'd respect the position of the race leader if they're having to work against the field. And it was pretty much, it felt like everybody against the Fords today. You bring up an important point. They were about the only teammates up there. I don't think you had Fords up there. You had 2 Fords up there, but they weren't teammates. And you had 2 Chevys up there, but they weren't teammates either. So you had 2 very similar cars, similar setups. They'd worked with each other before. So that made a huge difference in, I thought, the outcome of the race. That gave them an advantage, and they should take advantage of it. It gave Kyle the best chance for him to finish second or first, and it gave Denny the best chance for himself to finish second or first. You hate having to be the guy that's, okay, I'm going to have to be starting second because my teammate's a little bit ahead of me. But, I mean, I don't think if Kyle would have hooked up with Joey, I think Joey wins the race. I don't. Kyle was in the unenviable position of you can't win, so you got to help determine who will win. And Kyle had to go with his teammate, I thought.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And several feel good stories during today's Daytona 500. One of which was obviously the surprise of Matt DiBenedetto. For those of you who might not know, might not remember, Matt taking over the 95 Levine Family Racing ride, and this was the car that Casey Kane vacated last year, and the owner Levine, he actually pretty much put all his chips to the middle of the table and gambled on investing more in his team and his sport, and they now have an alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing. So I think it showed today, because I can't remember how many laps he led, 40, 50 laps. I don't know. I mean, it was a ton of laps, and he had a very strong car. It was very disappointing to see him taken out toward the end of the race. But again, you and I both know, I mean, you come down to the last 20, 30 laps of the Great American Race, the most important, most prestigious race on the circuit. You're going to, that's not unheard of to have a crash fest there toward the end. Nobody lifts. You heard Jeff Gordon mention on the Fox broadcast that I think it was Jeff or Ricky Craven. It might have been Ricky Craven that said, if you lift, you lose. I mean, that's the mindset that you got to have, that especially a few laps to go. Obviously, there's a lot of give and take at the beginning of the race, but when the chips are down and there's 20, 30 laps to go in the Daytona 500, it's each man for himself. And Paul Menard, I give him props. He owned it. He hooked the 95. He hooked DiBenedetto, and wow, the wreck was on, wasn't it? I think I saw 18 cars, 19 cars it took out. So
Yeah, you got Almarillo up and with a car underneath him. You got Ryan Blaney. You got uh, Dylan. You got Jimmy Johnson. Who? How many of these cars finished the race with major damage? It was kind of crazy. Martin Truex Jr. gets taken out. Um, Ryan Newman's pretty much crippled, though he finished his race on rims. It felt like it's kind of as great as that is. It is kind of disappointing to see a race of that magnitude finish with only 20 people. I mean, and really in contention is only 13. I think Busch alluded to that too when he said, "There's only 6 people to work with, so I don't really know how this race ends up." But it is a great story. Devin, I can't even say his name, but he is great. How do you say his name?
DiBenedetto.
DiBenedetto. Yeah, so that is a good good story. Hopefully the Levine Racing, they get a much needed boost from the teaming up with Joe Gibbs, and we saw how that helped Furniture Row last year. The team up and kind of working together and equipment sharing and research sharing. I mean, you even have the Chastain story, who had lost his ride in the Xfinity, and he got this one race ride, and he's running up in the top 15. He had one of the unwrecked cars. Him, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Busch had not been in anything, and he was up there running. And you had a lot of little rookies, which I also thought, while it was neat to see, I thought it also caused some issues at the end of the race. But we'll get to that in a second. The feel-good story too is Gibbs Racing with JD. The kind of honor JD. I mean, you saw how emotional Joe Gibbs was at the end of the race. I mean, that's probably the most. And I'm not knocking Joe Gibbs, but it's the most incoherent interview I've ever heard him give. He just seemed overwhelmed. I mean, just call it like it is. It was not a good interview.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I felt so sorry for him, and I know he's got a lot on his mind. But yeah, that doesn't rank up there with the best interviews given of all time. Ryan Preece in the 47 car was also a nice surprise there. He finished top 10, and Ryan Preece taking over the AJ Allmendinger ride, the 47 car, had a really good run. And you heard Joey Logano say after the race how special it was for him, for Preece to be pushing him toward the end, because they used to race against each other some years ago. So that was a feel good story as well. So a lot of storylines developing from today's Daytona 500. Shay, I don't know how long that race took, but it seemed like it took forever. And you know where I'm going with this.
Oh yeah, it was we started at. I wrote it down because you talked about it earlier. We started right on time. The flag dropped at 3:08.
3:08.
Yeah, we finished at almost 8 o'clock, maybe a little bit past. I can't remember. I mean, that's a 5-hour race right there.
Yeah, and all the leading up to today's race, it said, pre-race, tune in at 1. The race starts at 2:30. You just said it was after 3 o'clock before the race started. But anyway, here's where I'm going with this, folks. I can remember, back in the 80s, I can remember when I'd rush home from church to be able to watch the first part of the Daytona 500. I don't remember the start time. It might have been 12:30. So I don't remember, but I used to have to rush home to catch the first part of it. And even 1 o'clock starts fine with me. But anyway, I know there's a lot of pomp and circumstance surrounding the biggest, race of the year, the Super Bowl, and a lot of, big infield crowd there, the concert down there in the infield, but prior to the race and everything. But I just think that we need to have a 12:30 or 1 o'clock start for the race, and let's finish it like we used to at 4 o'clock, 4:30. I know we got lights down there, and some people like to finish it under the lights and so forth. But I'm a traditionalist, and I'm just I don't know. It's the Daytona 500. Hey, if you want to run the firecracker, if you want to run the summer race under the lights because of the extreme heat, I'm cool with that. But I'm a traditionalist. Let's back that start time up to 12:31. So we're done at 4:30. I shared with you back in my first Daytona 500 that I had went to was back in 1993. And it was an early start. I don't remember the exact time, probably 1 o'clock, 1:10, something like that. And we had flown down, me and a friend of mine. And after the end of the race, we got in our car, made it through traffic, drove to Jacksonville, Florida, where our departing flight was. And we made it back home to Tennessee, Bristol, Tennessee that night, and had a connecting flight to keep. So there's no way that could have occurred. I mean, with the race having gone so long today. So my problem's not that it was a long race as much as it was what time it started. And some of you out there may disagree, might like ending the race under the lights. But as a traditionalist, like I said, I like running the 500, and during the day, give me a winner during the day. I don't know. Do you have an opinion either way on that one, Shane?
Well, it's just a little late. I mean, right now we're looking at an 8:48 podcast time, and I mean we're coming out at pretty soon after watching the interviews and all that, coming in getting this podcast started. But I mean, you just kind of feel it just ate the entire Sunday.
Yeah,
that's not a bad thing. I mean, I went out to the NASCAR site and they said that the race only ran for 3 hours and 45 minutes. That didn't make any sense to me because I got to start at 3. Maybe after all the interviews, it ended up around 7:10, 7:15. But oh my gosh, that's just too long.
I bet they just think about. I bet they didn't count the red flag time. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I bet you're right there too.
Because I know that we had several 20+ minute red flags, or a couple of them anyways. I bet they stopped the clock whenever they threw the red. What do you think?
Well, I think they did, and that could account for some of the time discrepancy. But let's step back. And you made a comment, and it has bothered me. It always bothers me. You call this the Super Bowl when we play at the first game of the season. Nobody ever else does that. Daytona has this mystique of being the crown jewel of NASCAR, and we run it, and it's so important. And we call it the Super Bowl of racing. And I don't know. I think it's lost some of that. The NASCAR champion, whoever wins that's starting to get more publicity, though the Daytona has got to rank as one of the highest publicized races. I think that in Charlotte, to win those are just a little bit more prestigious than winning some of the other ones. And that's just a matter of fact. You go win Pocono, nobody remembers you. I mean, just going to be honest. You have some iconic races that if you can win, or if you can dominate tracks, you make your name for yourself. But Daytona is one of those races that when you win it, you go into iconic, legendary status. And if you don't win Michigan, nobody ever talks about it. Oh, that's the one track. He doesn't win Kansas. No, nobody cares. Everybody cares about the Daytona 500. I don't like the analogy of the Super Bowl because these guys aren't done with racing. This is the start of racing. What I consider it more like, and nobody's ever going to start doing this, but let's just get the analogy straight. And it's just me being contrarian here. But I think it's more like the Kentucky Derby. It's the kickoff to the Triple Crown. It's the kickoff to the Belmont Stakes, the Preakness Stakes. It is one of the most prestigious kickoffs in sports history. It's better than the Hall of Fame game. It's better than it ranks right up there, I think, with opening day. With the baseball. So it's more like an opening day festivity. We can call it Super Bowl, but I'd compare it more to a Kentucky Derby because you got 2 more races, but you want to win the Kentucky Derby. Because if you win the Kentucky Derby and don't win the Triple Crown, people remember you, but nobody remembers the Preakness State winner. Nobody remembers the Belmont. They remember the Triple Crown winner, which is and we in NASCAR, we give a Triple Crown winner every year, and that's the NASCAR champion. But the Kentucky Derby happens once a year. You celebrate that. That horse, if it wins it, that's $10 million. That thing's going to make right there. The other races aren't going to bring that, in my opinion. But pushing back, start times need to be earlier. But I think it's also where we're looking at the nationalization of the sport, or the attempted nationalization. We've gone from a Southern sport to a California sport, a entire nation. And maybe that's where we've stalled out a little bit in NASCAR. I think NASCAR needs a revamp. We can talk about that later, but I think NASCAR is doing some stuff. I mean, did you notice anything that they tried differently in this broadcast that you'd hope they'd build on?
I didn't understand the last part. Did they try anything that what?
That you'd like for them to build on, like broadcast for entertainment purposes?
I don't know. Let me just go back and bring the listeners up to speed on something before I delve into that. The Daytona 500 wasn't always the very first race of the season. Back in probably as late as the 1970s, NASCAR used to go out to Ontario, California to a road course out there, and that's how they would kick the season off. And then they'd come back east to Daytona for the 500. So it's not always been the first race of the season and schedule, but obviously over the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years it has, but it hadn't always been that way. But anyway, excuse me. You asked Shay, why is it the Super Bowl when was it the first race or Super Bowl? And I don't know. I hate using the excuse. That's how it's always been. So I would ask you, how do we fix that? Do we go to Homestead first, and then in November at Daytona? Again, to me, that's getting away from tradition, and as I've said on here, I'm a traditionalist. So how do you fix that, Shay? If I know you're not in a total agreement that it's the Super Bowl, and you don't like that it's the first race of the season, but so how do you remedy that?
Well, and let me back up. I don't like calling it the Super Bowl. I mean, I guess that's my one complaint about it. Do I think it needs to be moved? No, because opening day is a very special event. Daytona 500 is a very special event. Kentucky Derby is a very special event. If you try to move it to the crowning of the championship, I don't know. I think in NASCAR you need both events. So what are you going to open with? And that's not going to carry the prestige that you know what I'm talking about. What I would love to see is a more flamboyant, kind of like the Super Bowl. They do all kinds of festivities. Heck, if it's up to me, bring down the dirt trackers, build a freaking course out on the sand, and let them run on the sand one night of that week. I mean, just blow it out, or build a sand course or a dirt course in the middle. I mean, I know you got a golf course, but who cares? I mean, just build it in there.
That's an D&D. That's actually an D&D.
Okay, Indy, but you got the big lake there. Yeah. It's just a huge racetrack. Just blow it out. Do what it is. It's opening day. I think the Kentucky Derby opening day in football is not as grand as opening day in baseball. And baseball opening day is amazing. It's just great. The first day of the March Madness, you need those kickoff events, and Daytona is a kickoff event. I don't think you need to change it. You need to keep it special because that gives you a beginning. You have an end race that are both special. I just don't like calling it Super Bowl. It is not the end all be all. These guys are going for a championship. This is the opening day, but this is a crown jewel. It's like the Kentucky Derby. You love to win the Daytona 500 and win the championship. And that's hard to do. I don't think when's the last time somebody did that? Won the Daytona 500 and won the championship.
Well, you put me on the spot there, but I do remember back in the heyday of Dale Earnhardt Sr. and I remember they used to joke that if you won the Daytona 500, essentially you had a pretty bad year after that. So, we all know that Dale Sr. went down to Daytona many years trying to win the 500 before he ultimately did it in 1998, and all those near misses and almost wins that he had, they'd always say, well, we all know that if you win the 500, you have a bad year after that, it seems like, or that was the tradition up until that point, it seemed like, or that seemed to be the pattern of everything. So anyway, I get where you're coming from on that. And
I don't like Miami. I really don't like Miami as your ending race. I almost wish they'd move it to Charlotte, but that's just me.
Yeah,
A little bit.
For many, many years, it was Atlanta. Atlanta used to be the final race of the year, and most of you, or some of you might remember that. Some of you don't, but 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was Atlanta Motor Speedway that held the finale there, and yeah, it could be cool, it could be cold in November in Atlanta in the South there, and so
Yeah, but that push. Go ahead. I said, but then I'd push back that the NASCAR season's too long. We need to shorten it, and I mean, we're going into November. You're going to go head to head against football on Sundays. I think right there, you're taking on the juggernaut of sporting industries right now is the NFL. And I would think if we back it out before you getting into the Novembers of the NFL season, if you back out some races, if you're ending a little bit earlier, the reason why I don't like Homestead is just so far. I mean, Charlotte is the home of NASCAR.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I don't disagree with you. Atlanta Motor Speedway's had trouble. This is no secret. Atlanta's had problems putting people in seats, getting fans to attend races there. They lost one of their races a number of years back because of attendance woes, and obviously it was given to another track to give them. I can't remember which track it was now, another date or a new date or whatever. But anyway, what better way to put butts in seats, so to speak, than to have the finale back at Atlanta again? Of course, we're going to Atlanta. The circuit's going back to Atlanta next week. And we'll see what the attendance looks like, but it's still cold here. We're in Tennessee, and it's been raining a lot, but it can be cold obviously in February here, both here and Atlanta. And what better way than to move Atlanta as the finale again? That would definitely create more interest and more people to come when the championship is on the line. Now, I know that's likely never to happen. Obviously, you got the warm climate down in Miami. I can't remember the last time it was rained out, if ever, since they've been having it at Homestead. And Ford Championship weekend has grown in popularity over the years, and it seems to be a really good setting. But I can't disagree with you there, Shay. It's kind of a far cry from Charlotte, the mecca of motorsports or NASCAR, or NASCAR anyway, and it's pretty good haul from Daytona as well. So I don't disagree with you on that.
Well, I think we're good. And let's talk about it. Let's just be real. We're in I won't call it a honeymoon period, but we're in a stasis period that we're starting to see of NASCAR. And we're getting way off not talking about Daytona, but I think these repercussions that NASCAR fans need to start realizing. The TV contract runs out when? When does
it's still got a few more years? It's still got a few more years on it. I'd have to look it up, but they just re-upped a couple 3 years ago. So we still got I'm wanting to say at least handful. I'm wanting to say handful of years. Like I said, I'd have to look that up, but
and that being said, I'm kind of it looks like 2024.
Okay.
So we're good through 2024. So that's 5 years left. We're halfway through the deal. 2015, 2024. Is a 10-year deal, according to what I'm reading. We're going to see what they can actually do from here on out. But I think they've kind of started looking at it that the sport is currently being driven by advertising.
Sure.
And the TV contract's giving them some time, but businesses are looking for things that really put their name out there. And the one problem we got is that sponsors want some kind of exposure. I mean, teams are run by sponsorships. I mean, Furniture Row team closing was all due to sponsorships. Mm-hmm. They won a championship. They competed for one last year, and they closed down. it's a successful team closing because you don't have enough capital coming in based on sponsorships.
Right.
Sponsorships are driven by TV deals. That's where it is. Doesn't matter how much you get if you can't find recognizable people. That's also probably why the average age of drivers was 31 in this year's Daytona 500.
Mhm.
And you can remember a time when there were 32-year-old rookies coming into the sport. You know what I mean? I mean, you don't pay dues that much. There's a faster learning curve at all the tracks. That and I'd even argue that it's kind of the same way in other sports. The racing's so different at the cup level compared to the other levels because the cars are different, that even at the other levels, you're not learning as much. If you have that much talent to drive cup cars, cup teams probably want you up in the cup car as soon as possible because you can only learn so much at Xfinity because you're not driving the same car because there's a learning curve, and if you're that talented and they need to cash in on you as quickly as possible, because it's a marketing game. And so NASCAR's got some stuff to do. They have some things to kind of work out on how they can kind of drive this advertising and make everything go a little bit better. And I'm a little bit off field on this, but I think they got to start worrying about the TV and advertising and what we can do to, look at the way the races are. Daytona 500 is one of them. How can you make them more entertaining? And, jumping into a question I had earlier, which was, what I noticed in the broadcast today was they tried to do some entertainment stuff that I think helped keep you more engaged throughout the race. I know you and my wife, Michelle, were playing that trivia game, trying to win one of those card of cans that they did for Busch Beer.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that's a great way to keep everyone involved because I fell asleep during the first part of it because they're just driving around in a straight line. They're not really mixing it up until the end. So, it's great to have that little trivia where you try to respond in and win something kind of special for memorabilia.
Mhm.
I thought that's a great entertainment way. So I think they got to look for ways like that to keep the audience more interactive. Stage racing is great. Did you notice anything in the broadcast that you thought, well, wow, okay, they're trying some new stuff?
Now that you mentioned the Busch Beer promo or contest, I really didn't see that that's what you were getting at. One of the things I noticed, I don't know whether it's obviously to keep the fans engaged. One of the things that I noticed was the post-race interview. Last year, the race winner was interviewed on the start-finish line, and then he drove to victory lane and gets interviewed again. And I noticed that tonight, of course, the race winner was interviewed on the start-finish line, and then they hooked the race winner, Denny Hamlin, up with a bunch of microphones, and the booth, Jeff Gordon, Mike Joy, and Darrell Waltrip actually interviewed him, which I thought was obviously different than what we've seen in the past. So, which to me, the two interviews really made no sense to me. Why do you have to interview the winner twice, 5 minutes apart from one another? I never really got that. I never understood the theory behind that. But what are some other things that you actually saw or noticed?
Well, I kind of like that too, and I enjoy the interviews with the race car drivers. So I thought they go to that and they do a direct interview with him. Then they have a separate interviewer trying to interview the other finishers of the race. They always do the top five, isn't that right? They do the top five after the race.
It depends, but at least the top three anyway.
Yeah. Other than that, I didn't really see much else. I saw, I mean, really, to me, that's about all the entertaining I saw. I don't know. I think they need to make more strides that way. They need to look at how can they make the broadcast. And some people would say that would be on Fox and NBC shoulders to make it more entertaining to watch. But I think there's some responsibility that falls to NASCAR to make it entertaining to watch too. Just like basketball went to a shot clock to make the game a little bit more exciting. other sports have gone to ways to make the games just a little bit more exciting, more fan friendly. The you remember when the XFL introduced the on-field camera, which a lot of people go, well, yeah, that's a stupid idea with a guy running around with a camera in the middle of the action. It was, but that led to the over-the-field camera that we currently have that we love those views of NFL,
Right.
you know, and so it's that pushing of the technology to give a better and better fan experience. They have the inside the car cameras that are very neat and very fun. They try different things. So I think it's very important. Daytona was I don't know if you had to rate it, was it a very entertaining race?
Well, I think the last 30 or 40 laps certainly was, with all of the, I hate to say it, carnage, the wrecks, the everything that took place there, which is again not uncommon for the end of the Daytona 500. We don't always see that, but you know, more times than not, we see a lot of carnage in the 500. So I thought the first 2/3 of the race wasn't all that exciting necessarily. But toward the end, I thought it was really getting good, and they were really ramping things up. One of the things that really caught me by surprise, and probably caught a lot of other people by surprise, is are the Toyotas. We've been talking about Fords really since Talladega last year, when the 4 Stewart-Haas cars did something that we'd never seen before, which is hook up at a super speedway and just blew everybody away, just took off. And so I think, and the speed weeks leading up to today's Daytona 500 made you think that was going to see more of the same. Obviously, Kevin Harvick can afford to win in the first duel. Then Joey Logano with an outstanding last lap pass to win his duel again in a Ford. So I think most of the experts thought that it was going to be another Ford runaway, and that's not what we saw today. Yeah, Joey had probably one of the strongest cars out there, if not the strongest. But the Toyotas, and they even mention this on the broadcast, had a meeting and decided that they were going to work together, and obviously Joe Gibbs Toyota's finished 1, 2, 3. So that surprised me. I really thought I had Logano winning it in fantasy. I thought I had Bowyer, I had Amarola. I really thought those Stewart-Haas Fords were really going to be a force to be reckoned with, and they were caught up in most of those wrecks that we saw late in the event. So but anyway, again, it was Matt DiBenedetto and a Toyota leading a ton of laps, and which is Joe Gibbs equipment, and obviously Toyota finishing 1, 2, 3. I think that surprised a lot of people, including myself.
Well, and I've got the stats for you. Matt led 49 laps, which is the most of anybody, followed by William Byron at 44, Kyle Busch at 37, Denny Hamlin at 30. So if you look at that, Joe Gibbs was up in front probably 3/4 of the race.
Yeah.
So, the strength of the Toyotas was well-founded right there. However, we didn't get a true test. I felt like Clint Bowyer had a car to reckon with, especially towards the end, and he was moving up, and he was actually going around McDowell when he got wrecked. Harvick had shown strength, so you never saw the top Fords get up there at the end of the race, and you had 2 of the top Toyotas up there. I mean,
what was the deal with? Did they ever interview Bowyer? I know he said on the they showed him say on the radio, or they played that bit that he was apologizing to his team. Sorry, I was going for it. Which I know me and you talked about this during the race, Shay. Obviously, he moved up on McDowell after he almost made the pass and essentially wrecked himself and a few others, but. I think he still had. I think if it had just stayed on the bottom there, I think he had the pass. So I really was anxious to hear what Clint had to say. I know you asked me, hey, is that a spotter error? Well, it could be, but Clint's radio traffic didn't sound like he was blaming a spotter. He was apologizing for it. So perhaps he knew he's moving up kind of early, or maybe he hoped McDowell was going to back out of it, or what have you. Did you ever see any interview from him or comments?
I'm looking on the website. I'm not seeing anything. So that would have been a potential good interview, because I'd like to know how Clint Boyer's been a pretty honest. I kind of like those kind of drivers. I've never had a problem with Kyle Busch. They're very honest, show everything on the emotion. I've not enjoyed the interviews that are just the whitewashed interviews. I think while that causes the least amount of stress for your advertisers, it's not as entertaining. You like to see, the passion. So I'd like to have seen Boyer. He would. I'm not going to say he'd been mad or anything, but he'd told it like it is, and a little bit better than Kyle Busch does, and that's his problem. Kyle doesn't know how to say it with any kind of tact.
Yeah. I was really pleased. I'm a Jimmy Johnson fan. I was really pleased with the run that Jimmy had going today. He was running, I think, second to William Byron there when he elected to come onto pit road. It flat out got ran over by a couple of rookies. I just could not believe that. Because Jimmy had such a good run going, and it wiped out that left rear of Jimmy's car, and I'm surprised he was even able to still get gas in it. But to his credit, they taped that thing up, and where did I see he finished? Top 10, wasn't it?
Let me pull it up. He finished.
Couldn't believe it. He's
ninth. He finished
ninth, and he was involved in the big one. He was involved in the big one. He was up there near the wall. I saw him, but anyway, I was very pleased with the way.
But come on, let's just be honest. Jimmy finished that high, but you got Ryan Newman at 14, who we know he's running around on rims. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had been in like 3 races. Brad Keselowski, I don't even know how he's still running on the track. Bowman, Chastain. Chastain's the only guy that's running that you didn't think had much damage, and he's kind of a rookie. I mean, he finished behind Priest Larson, who was in a huge crash.
He was in several wrecks.
So I'm not going to say it's not. It showed me a resiliency to that team, which you wondered with a new crew chief how he would handle a problem like this. And I mean, they had a major problem. I mean, they ripped off half that quarter panel. They couldn't not fix it, but they couldn't actually put a new quarter panel on it. So tape and jury rig, and they was able to keep gas in that thing. And he kept being able to, I wouldn't say maintain great speed, but he won the war of attrition. He stayed on that lead lap. He got 2 lucky dogs?
Yeah, at least.
And so he did his job, and he went out there and fought. And that was a disappointing storyline. I wanted to see the Canals Johnson friendly battle, and I don't think it's friendly. I'll just be honest. I think there's a pride issue there, and each one of them must be able to sit down at the end of the year and say, man, I wish you had a better year. I just think there's a little pride issue between those two. I think they're good friends, but there's a friendly rivalry there, and we didn't get to see that played out on the track. I thought Byron had a great car, but you could see it starting to play out throughout the race, but the finish wasn't there for that Byron versus Jimmy Johnson type finish, because that's what we want to see. And so we had a lot of great storylines, had a lot of great things. I mean, we've not said it, but you were talking about Joe Gibbs. They finished 1, 2, 3. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, they go 1, 2, 3 right there. Eric Jones, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, reverse order. So,
I think obviously we've got 35 more races for the Canals Johnson battle to play out, and so we've not seen the end of that. And I know that I know you're anxious to find out. Because you've asked me before who's going to win. Who's going to win first, Johnson or Canals with William Byron, and that was brought up today in the pre-race telecast. And I think Jeff Gordon obviously said, he was going to go with 7-time, or one of them said they're going to go with Jimmy Johnson. But But anyway,
Well, and Gordon in the middle of the broadcast, and Byron is up near the front. He did say, "Wow, Canals has got him up there," and the kid's a good driver too. I mean, even Gordon kind of let it out.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I agree with you. I think there's probably a lot of competitive spirit between Canals and Johnson. I think there's a lot of competition. There may be a little bit of animosity between them two. They're both very obviously very competitive. We talked a little bit about that on our first podcast and so forth. So anyway, it'll be remains to be seen. What I thought was interesting, and I think you and I mentioned this during the race, that Jimmy and Will Byron didn't pit together on that pit stop that Jimmy got ran over by those rookies. They didn't pit together. What did you pick up on that? Were they Jimmy trying to going on his own there and not pit with Byron, or what was the strategy there?
The only thing we can go by is what Canals. They interviewed Canals pretty quickly after that, and they were talking about how either Jimmy's team or somebody was trying to keep it secret, and that's how they weren't able to pit together, because they were supposed to pit together, and it was a very late signal or a very delayed signal, and even I want to say Byron said, "I just saw him stick 2 fingers out. I didn't really see the whole hand out." And so, I mean, that's a communication issue. And even they said that should have been communicated between spotters, and not by
drivers. Yeah,
right, not by hand signals. So, was that a rookie mistake? Not a rookie mistake, but a communication mistake, because they're new teams and the communication is not set. I don't know. I mean, and that is something that, will they work together? That's a question we will all have, and can, as a team, because they need to learn how to work together. Even we saw today, Kyle Busch put his ego aside and help Denny today, and so you would expect Johnson and Byron to, whoever's in the better position gets the help from the other person, with the thought that you mess up, I'm gonna go around you. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just the racing rules. So I thought, that kind of leads into this is my thought, and you can add on to it, but we didn't learn a lot today. The only thing you can take away from today is, how did the pit crews do? How did the communication look? Who looked prepared? But we're not going to see this racing package again, are we?
No, you bring up a good point, Shay. That this is the last so-called restrictor plate race that we'll see, and we're moving on to Atlanta next week, where we use the tapered spacer. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we saw new teams, new drivers, new crew chiefs, those types of things. But all in all, and I know I mentioned this to you at the end of the race when you asked me what my key takeaways were or whatever. I said the real season, the season really starts next week in Atlanta at the mile and a half, and we all know there's a ton of mile and a half racetracks on the schedule. So Daytona, Talladega have always been the wild cards. It really evens the playing field with the restrictor plate. We know that lesser funded teams are more competitive at the restrictor plate races. So I think after next week, we'll definitely see who the front runners are when we head out of Atlanta this time next Sunday night.
Oh yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of telling things. You're going to see more cracks. You're going to see who has their package put together better, and who is actually going to be kind of working better together. And we'll see who's figured it out. I mean, this is all new to everybody, the spacers and all this stuff that's supposed to create more downforce and create more pack racing. Maybe that's the takeaway. How did they handle a pack? I mean, if every race is going to look like the Daytona 500, then I'm just going to turn it off to the last 20 laps or go to sleep. If they're going to run around single file and then go 2 to 3 at the end, I mean, I don't know if that's good racing either. Part of racing is adjustments and making your car a lot better than the other guy, and having runs and having to figure out short runs versus long runs. And are they going to be able to do that, or have they made the cars too close together? You can't do enough to make a separation. I mean, I'm not good enough at understanding mechanics or racing or what this stuff's going to do, but that's a worry. Pack racing looks cool until it's boring, until the drivers realize they don't want to fight for 400 laps because they're not getting any headway. And then they just pretty much, get in line and they just kind of poke their head out every so often. And then they go, okay, we'll just get in on the last 50 laps. Well, you better have something else going on. I mean, pit crews become a little bit more important, but I'm really interested. This will be an interesting season. Who can get up on speed the quickest? That'll be really cool too.
Yeah. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't interview Kevin Harvick either. I was really waiting for comments from Boyer and Harvick and some others. It seems like outside of the big one, when they were, they did good with the interviews there. They were back-to-back interviews. I really, I was disappointed that I didn't hear those interviews, and maybe I missed them, but I don't think I did on Harvick and everything. So anyway, definitely, in my opinion, an exciting race, especially again the last third of the race when things started really ratcheting up and the give and take. There was obviously more take than give there, which again is typical of any race, but especially the biggest race on the schedule there. So anyway, I thought it was a really good race. A lot of torn up race cars. Which again is kind of what you expect to see or come to expect from that. So, go ahead.
Well, and this is what I'm wanting to know. Right now, does this change who you think is going to be in at the Final Four?
Do I think that this is going to change anything?
Right. So you one race in. I'm sure before we started, you had an idea who your Final Four is going to be. Come on. Who's going to be at Homestead fighting for the championship? Did today throw somebody out of that?
Well, no, because I don't think it's still too early to know who the front runners are going to be. I know that you mentioned in passing the other night, hey, I think, Kyle Busch, Truex, Harvick are your front runners. And I joked, I was like, well, of course, that's not really going out on a limb there because those were three of the four final that we had in the Final Four last year. So I think it's too early to tell who the key players are. Remember, as you alluded to it a moment ago, we've got the new rules package that we're going to see, and maybe some teams picked up on it or quicker and better than others. So that's going to be the key thing with the new rules package is who can adapt, who's really done their homework, who can really get on top of things quickly here with this new rules package. So it'll probably be a couple of races before we really see who the front runners are going to be for the championship come November, come October and everything. But anyway, I'm really excited to go to Atlanta and see what Atlanta has in store for us. So how are we doing on time?
All right, yeah, we're about over. So
we're about over. Imagine
about
that.
over.
Me talking about NASCAR. I was talking about NASCAR and I was going over. So any parting shots, any final comments from Daytona night here, Shay?
Yeah, I think Charlotte's the telling one. But I think also, anyway, I think Charlotte's going to tell us a lot about the season because that's your mile and a half. I'm not Charlotte, sorry, Atlanta. Atlanta's going to tell us a lot about the season. I think, why is that? Atlanta's going to look like most of the track's going to be.
Yeah.
So, and they'll have the racing package that we'll see for most of the season. So I think Atlanta's going to say a lot, but I'm going to put you on a spot. Of the Final Four last year, which one do you think will not make the Final Four?
Let's see. We had Truex, Joey, Kevin,
and Bush.
and Kabu. If I had to pick one that wasn't going to be back in the mix,
Yep.
oh man, that's a tough one.
You got to pick one, because unless you want to go with all four of them coming back and redoing it again, so
All
one
right.
of them have to drop off.
All right, I'm going to make a lot of fans mad here. Truex doesn't make it.
Hey, I agree with you, and we don't agree often, but
No, we don't.
but
Especially in sports, we rarely agree. I just don't. And the reason I say that, Shay, is case in point, Eric Jones had a tremendous rookie year. I say tremendous. He didn't win, but he ran up front a couple of years ago with Furniture Row. You remember that? He was Truex's teammate over there at Furniture Row, and had a very impressive season. Again, he was winless, but he ran up front, led some races, should have probably won a race or two. Well, anyway, then they shut that team down. Eric Jones goes to Gibbs and struggles. And struggles. I know he got one win last year, the Daytona July race, but just a lot of problems, a lot of pit road problems, and just a lot of gremlins in that. So the reason I say that is I'm thinking that Truex might fall into the same mold there, in terms of, even though the same team, people are there. I don't know. I just don't, who knows? Truex could win 12 races and win the championship again this year, but if I had to choose amongst those four, which you asked me to do, I would say Truex. So, you agree?
Oh, I agree totally, because even though they were a satellite of Gibbs Racing, Truex was the man at Furniture Row. I think Kyle Busch is the man at Joe Gibbs, hands down.
I agree.
He is the man. Martin Truex is up against a little bit of a learning curve. Even though they were a satellite team, they were their own team.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're having to sit in the fold, and they didn't bring everybody over. So there's some adjustment they have to make that team more cohesive. I think in the end it's going to bite them, whereas they were so efficient the last two championship runs about getting every point they can. I think something's going to slip through them, and that's going to open the door for a Chase Elliott or I really think Chase is set up to have a great one. I think he could be set up to break out. Maybe even a Blaney or somebody, Keselowski could slide in there. So I think Truex is coming into a position where Logano's got a solid team, been very consistent. They've been together for a while. Busch has a solid team. Harvick's team's been together for a while. So the change is with Truex, and I think he could be the one that falls out this year. And that could be it. But I agree with you. It's a highly entertaining last bit to Daytona, and even caused us to argue a couple of times about it. So that's always good.
Yeah.
It should be an exciting season this year, and we'll see how it kind of goes, and we'll kind of do some roundups and all that. It's hard to talk about Daytona because it's such a one-off race. It's so big. It's, they spend lots of money to win this race, but in reality, it's a one-off race. I guess that's why everybody kind of laughed at, like you alluded to earlier. You win Daytona and you had a cursed year after that. Because
that's how it was back in the 90s. Anyway, I remember, like I said, Dale Sr. making reference to that. Yeah, we didn't win Daytona, but look at Derek Cope. But last year he won it and he didn't do anything or whatever. Just making reference to that used to be a trend anyway.
When there's so few, the mile and a halfers dominate this sport. Or at least they have a lot of races, and if you're really good at that track, but you're better at a super speedway, you don't do enough races at super speedways to make a huge difference in the outcome of the season. Whereas if you can't drive a mile and a half and you're doing bad performances mile and a half, you're not going to end up where you want to be at the end of the season.
Very, very true. Very, very, very good point there. Hey, we agreed on something else tonight, too.
I know, it's
wow.
I know. What's up with that? And hopefully we'll have some better stuff to talk about. But, Daytona is a great kickoff.
Yeah.
I still feel like NASCAR has some stuff to do to fix. And I think the teams are a little they're unknown right now. And this new Worlds package, we'll have to wait and see how that goes, and see how everything kind of adjusts. As you said earlier, now I'm going to leave with this. I think we need to keep an eye out and see how far NASCAR is willing to go, because they have shown that they're willing to make some broad changes right now, I think. And so, as a NASCAR fan, you just got to keep your eye on it, see what they're going to do.
I totally agree. And I know we've gone over on time. And Shay, I just wanted to thank you again for setting all this up as you normally do, and for all the work that you put into making this podcast a success, and to get it going. And hopefully we'll have another roundup after Atlanta next week. And so once again, I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in and who listened to Raceday Roundup. And I just want to say, for Showtime Shay McClure, I'm Shannon Price, saying good night to all. And just remind you that if you have anything you'd like to say to us, or any questions or comments, feel free to do so once again at racedayroundup@gmail.com. All right.
See y'all later.
All right. Good night.